You are listening to PastThink.com audiobook. Please like and subscribe, thank you. Chapter 66. Guan Yu goes to a dangerous feast, with his great sword. The empress tries to have Cao Cao murdered, but is killed instead, and Cao Cao's daughter becomes empress. Zhang Zhao's plot is simple. Xuanda is dependent upon Kong Ming, and Kong Ming's brother, Zhuge Jin, is here in our own court. Let's seize the whole family and send him to Xuanda with the message that unless we receive Jingzhou back, the family will be killed. To this, Sun Quan replies, but Zhuge Jin's an honest man. On what grounds could I do this? Bring him in on the plot, replies Zhang Zhao. And that is what happens. Zhuge Jin's family is quietly hidden away, and off he goes. When Zhuge Jin arrives at Chengdu, Kong Ming is only too aware of what is going on and of the whole plot. Taking his brother aside, he asks, as if really worried, what is troubling him. My family face death, says Zhuge Jin. Oh no, says Kong Ming. Surely not because of Jingzhou? This is terrible. I am so sorry. But, look, don't worry. I have a plan. Reassured, Zhuge Jin is then led in to meet Xuanda. Coming before Xuanda, Zhuge Jin presents the message from Sun Quan that he will kill Jin's family unless Xuanda surrenders Jingzhou. Furious, Xuanda cries out, not only have I lost my wife to Sun Quan, which is excuse enough to invade Wu, but now I am told to hand back Jingzhou. Suddenly Kong Ming throws himself on the ground, crying, I beg you, to save my family. Please return Jingzhou. Seeming to be moved by this, Xuanda agrees and says, because you, my dear friend, have asked, I agree. I will hand back half the territory. Thank you, sir, says Kong Ming. Will you now write formally to Guan Yu ordering this? Xuanda agrees. But, Zhuge Jin, says Xuanda, be very careful how you explain all this to Guan Yu. He can be very volatile, to put it mildly. Be very diplomatic in how you discuss this. So Zhuge Jin is given the letter, and sent on his way. The meeting between Guan Yu and Zhuge Jin is a disaster, which is exactly what Kong Ming planned. Guan Yu point-blank refuses to surrender the territory, claiming that he is defending the imperial lands of the Han, and that he swore a vow in the peach orchard with Xuanda to uphold the Han. Zhuge Jin scuttles back to Kong Ming in Chengdu, but he is away, so it is to Xuanda that he makes his complaint. Tell you what, says Xuanda. Go back to Wu. Let me finish my conquests here in Shu, and then I will invite Guan Yu to come and govern them. At that point Jingzhou can be returned. Realizing he has been played and now utterly humiliated, Zhuge Jin has no option but to return to Sun Quan empty-handed. Sun Quan decides to act on the earlier promise of Xuanda to return some parts of the land. He sends off a group of bureaucrats to try to simply take over the disputed part of the territory. They are no match for Guan Yu's fury, which soon sends them packing. Deeply frustrated, Sun Quan summons Lu Su, who of course, acted as guarantor of this whole deal. He sets forth a plot. Let me lure Guan Yu to a banquet at Luku. I'll present our case carefully and thoroughly to him. If I can't persuade him to surrender the territory, then, well, I'll have him assassinated. Now, when the invitation arrives, Guan Yu agrees to go. But his son Guan Ping is deeply troubled. Why have you accepted this invitation? This is clearly a trap. Not to go, says Guan Yu, would see me marked as a coward. At the very least, says Guan Ping, let me follow behind you with some men in case of trouble. Eventually Guan Yu agrees that Guan Ping can follow behind quietly with an armed force, ready to attack if summoned. So it is that Guan Yu arrives sailing down the river to meet Lu Su. But not alone. With him is his bodyguard, Zhou Tsang, with a very large sword, and a handful of other fierce-looking warriors to boot. Somewhat perturbed, Lu Su invites them into his tent for the banquet. Lu Su, conscious of his duplicitous role, cannot look Guan Yu in the eye, while Guan Yu acts as if there is nothing amiss whatsoever. When Lu Su tries to raise the issue of the disputed territories, Guan Yu waves this aside by saying that banquets are not designed for state discussions. But Lu Su persists. Sun Quan only holds a modest amount of land in the south, and it was an act of kindness to lend you and your brother Jingzhou. Now you've conquered Shu, and as a result Jingzhou should really be returned. Yet you won't even give us the half of the territory that Xuanda has agreed should be handed over. Guan Yu points out the sacrifices, battles and risks that Xuanda has taken in order to help Lu Su and Sun Quan against their enemies. Why should we have done so much and received so little? Asks Guan Yu. That simply is not true, says Lu Su. When you were in trouble, Sun Quan was happy to help and give you a base from which to venture forth. But this kindness has not been reciprocated. Xuanda has Shu but still holds on to Jingzhou. This is a dishonorable action and a scandal. Do you honestly not see this? Sorry, says Guan Yu, but this is Xuanda's concern, not mine. At this Zhou shouts from lower down the hall, this land should only belong to those who are virtuous, not just you lot from the south. Guan Yu rises and grabs the sword from Zhou hand, shouting, silence. This is official business. What's this to do with you? Get out, and Zhou, catching the meaning of this, heads outside and summons Guan Ping and his armed troop. Draping his left arm around Lu Su and holding the great sword in his right, Guan Yu stands as if drunk and informs a terrified Lu Su that in return for his hospitality he invites him to a banquet in Jingzhou, where they can continue the discussion. Lu Su is then half dragged, half escorted down to the riverbank. His men cannot attack for fear of their lord being killed. Only when they reach the bank and Guan Yu steps into his boat does he release Lu Su. He can only watch helplessly as Guan Yu sails away downriver. He had little time for these men of the south. Traveling alone as he did to their banquet, he showed great bravery and spirit. Not even Xiangru could surpass him. When Lu Su reports the failure of this plot to Sun Quan, he declares that he is determined now to go to war to seize Jingzhou. But then word comes that Cao Cao is preparing to attack with over 300,000 troops, and the plans for Jingzhou are put on hold while Wu prepares to face this new threat. But the threat never materializes. Cao Cao is presented with a formal memorial by one of his advisors, Fu Gan. You're renowned, sir, writes Fu Gan, for your success in suppressing rebels and bandits. You have complete control over much of the empire, with the exceptions of Shu and Wu. Of these, Wu is guarded by the Great River, and Shu by mountain ranges. Concentrate your efforts not on conquest, but on good government. You should accept that the empire has been divided into three. Instead of war, encourage civil government, support learning. And bide your time. The memorial has the desired effect, and Cao Cao abandons his planned attack, and instead starts to found schools and colleges, and to recruit scholars. This almost imperial-like action encourages some of his flunkies to suggest that he should be given a new title, King of Wei. This is stoutly resisted by the chief of the imperial civil service. However, when he is taken on one side and told he will be murdered if he resists, he falls ill and dies shortly after. Not long after, waving his sword, Cao Cao storms into the imperial palace. His arrival terrifies the emperor and empress. Sun Quan and Xuanda, says Cao Cao, now rule their own territories and show no respect to the court. What are we to do? Surely that is up to you, given your skills, says the emperor, to which Cao Cao angrily replies, that makes it sound like it's my fault. If you're willing to be of help to me, I will, of course, be very grateful. If not, then I would prefer to be simply left alone, says the emperor. This infuriates Cao Cao even more, and he storms out. Deeply disturbed by all this, servants of the emperor say they have heard that Cao Cao wants to be made a king, and that if the emperor is not careful Cao will usurp the throne. In tears, the empress says passionately, my father, Fu Wan, has long wished to get rid of Cao Cao. I'll write secretly to him and encourage him to plan for Cao Cao's assassination. Don't forget what happened to Dong Cheng, says the emperor. He was discovered and killed. If this is discovered, it'll be fatal for us. This life is so full of fear already, says the Empress. It is like sitting on pins, so I would prefer to die than live another day like this. So they choose one of the very few people they believe they can trust to carry a letter to Fu Wan, the eunuch Mu Shun. Hiding the letter in his hair, Mu Shun makes his way to Fu Wan's house. On reading his daughter's appeal, Fu Wan realizes the scale of the task his daughter has set before him. To do this, he says to Mu Shun, "We will need the support of Xuanda and Sun Quan and their armies." In the letter he sends back with Mu Shun, he urges the Emperor and Empress to write secret letters to both leaders, asking them to come and destroy the traitor. Mu Shun again hides a letter in his topknot and is returning to the court when he is stopped by Cao Cao, who has learned of the plot. "Where have you been?" asks Cao Cao. "The Empress is sick, so I've been to call her doctor," says Mu Shun. "And where is this doctor?" inquires Cao Cao. Coming, replies Mu Shun. But Cao Cao is not fooled. Mu Shun is searched, and before long the letter is found. Yet, despite torture, Mu Shun will not betray the Empress. But to no avail. That night Cao Cao arrests Fu Wan and the whole family. Then he orders Qi Lu of the royal guard to go and seize the imperial seal of the Empress. With 300 armed men, Qi Lu bursts into the imperial palace and, brushing aside the protests of the emperor, he orders the seal to be brought and handed over. Meanwhile, Minister Hua Xian, leading 500 soldiers, has also arrived and he demands that the Empress be given over to him. She, meanwhile, has hidden herself behind a false wall in her quarters, but this cannot prevent what is going to happen. Ripping the wall down, Hua Xian hauls the Empress out by her hair. "Spare me," she pleads. "Ask the Prime Minister yourself," he replies curtly. And at this, the Empress is dragged out, barefoot, by 2 guards. Hua Xian enters the main hall as his guards struggle with the protesting Empress. When the Emperor sees her bound and held, he realizes that all is over for them now. But despite this he rushes to her and, holding her tight to him, bursts into tears. "This is the end," says the Empress, to which the Emperor replies, "And I too have no idea when my end will come." He watches helpless as the Empress is dragged from the room. The Emperor collapses weeping, while the Empress is taken to see Cao Cao and to her fate. "I've treated you both so well, and this is how you repay me. By planning my murder. Either I die or you do," shouts Cao Cao. And there and then she is mercilessly beaten to death by the soldiers. Cao Cao's fury knows no bounds. Entering the palace, he has her 2 young sons seized and then poisoned. By the end of the day Fu Wan, Mu Shun and over 200 members of their families have been executed in the public square. Fear spreads among all the officials in the court. This all happened in late AD 215. As a poet has said, Cao Cao epitomizes cruelty, as Fu Wan symbolizes loyalty. Pity this imperial couple. How much better are ordinary lives. The emperor does not eat for days after this. So Cao Cao goes to see him. "Don't be upset. I've no plans to rebel. Indeed, my own daughter is already a member of your palace women, and she's virtuous and a loyal woman. I suggest she takes the Empress's place." To this outrageous proposal the emperor has no option but to agree. So just over a month later, on the first day of the new year, Cao Cao's daughter becomes the Empress of Han, and not a voice is raised in opposition. As a result, Cao Cao grows more and more powerful, and he decides the time has come to conquer both Wu and Shu. He summons Cao Ren and Xiahou Dun to come and plan the war. It is Xiahou Dun who suggests what should happen next. Forget attacking either Wu or Shu at this time. Instead attack Zhonglu and Hanzhong, and then we can seize Shu. "That's exactly what I think," says Cao Cao. Can anything stop Cao Cao? Let's find out.